Hello, thank you for joining us. Oh, we're not ready?
Oh,
Okay.
I
I was so ready.
I know.
We usually
started just
do
like
it a little bit early so they know we're aware
that they're there.
and that they're going to wait a minute. Hi, thank you for joining us this evening for our gifted support group here at IEA. My name is Amber McLaren. I am the enrollment coordinator here. I wanted to give you a heads up that we will be starting in just a couple of minutes. So please hang in there and we'll get started very soon. Thank you very much.
Great. So you can just stay snacks and then have a seat.
I didn't read.
Summer classes yet?
They are up online, but they are not up for enrollment yet. So you can start looking at them and see what the schedule is. I'm planning ahead. And the times for the sessions are fine.
Our own. Okay.
Maybe I'll just try to pick my favorite one and watch it like.
Yeah. That's a Actually, very good diet and put it in your house. It's a good idea. We can try.
I'll look at the schedule more detailed.
I think that's really the campus. Oh, I can think so, but I haven't been. I'll give you the info.
Great, yeah, you can sign in right here, and then there's some snacks. And yes, there is actually. So down the hall, right at the end of this hall, there's a door at the end. And then the presentation is happening right here. So I think they're just about to get started.
Small groups. Finding a phone, like she found it on but they're not allowed. Yeah. Oh my God. The fairy decapitated to make you home. I really didn't like it.
Yeah. Then this will be some.
Maybe far away. In a couple of years.
Yeah,
I think that makes the biggest difference because
you mean the small?
he didn't have a husband because the counselor, his counselor was just the owner of the whole time. His husband was very active with the wanted to go out with boys. So then the cat was just screaming. He would not be able to take away cookies or s'mores, and he wouldn't let them participate in everything at the camp because he could hate that. He changed the last year, and then he had a good class.
Keep your patience, guys. We'll get started in just a moment.
We're just relaxing without the kids.
It's quiet. It's nice. All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Just to start again, my name is Amber McLaren. I am the enrollment coordinator here at the Institute for Educational Advancement, or IEA. For those of you who are new in the room, IEA is a nonprofit organization who's been working to serve gifted and talented youth for over 20 years. And we do that through services like this one and programming. Programming is available at various age ranges, and part of which is going to be touched on tonight in this presentation. We specifically developed these meetings essentially as a place to open up a forum for parents to talk about what's going on with their students, talk about what's going on in their own experiences, and have a safe environment to really learn and develop our own coping mechanisms and really develop ways to help our students grow. So feel free to ask questions. This is a safe place, and we really encourage that connection in this community. So thank you for joining us today and being a part of that. I'd like to introduce our president and co-founder of IEA, Ms. Betsy Jones. She's going to be giving our presentation tonight. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time out of your voting day to spend some time with us today. Appreciate that and all of that. This presentation that we're doing tonight is a new one for us. And it's based upon a lot of research that we have done and information that we've gathered on really looking at the importance of nature and how that impacts our children. Not just gifted children, but all of our children. And one of the reasons why this has been so compelling to us is that over the years, we've developed a variety of programs at the Institute. When we were founded 21 years ago, we really felt it was important to understand all aspects of self of a child, the mind, the body, the spirit, the social, emotional needs of a young person. In doing that, realizing children are gifted 24/7, not just when they're in class. You probably experienced some of their giftedness and other aspects of the day, that we really needed to figure out what all that meant and how that impacted a child. Well, sure enough, if you recall, when you're outside, there's a certain calming effect of that peace. And what does that mean? So something really was going on there that we wanted to take a little time to think about and to look at. So tonight, we're going to talk about that. In those of you that have not heard me speak before, I appreciate conversation. Again, this is a new presentation for us, so ask those questions. We're going to clean it up and make sure it's one of our better ones because it's really important to our heart. Many of the photos and pictures you're going to see tonight are from one of our particular programs called UNASA. So while we're not talking about that camp in particular, it does give us examples, real world examples of how we see this research come through and come out. So for example, this is a picture of many of our graduating campers from UNASA. Sunrise. The peace and quiet that they receive here is soulful and impactful. And many of these young people are those that you would never have expected would be sitting quietly on a lake looking at the sunrise. We as an organization believe that every child deserves the opportunity to learn something new every day, wherever that might be. It could be in a classroom, it could be outside, it could be on a mountaintop, it could be in the car, but learning something new every day, whatever that looks like and feels like, is the fuel to the mind for a gifted child. And we also know that there's more and more research to back up our theories of what we felt is important, that our mental, physical, and spiritual health are directly associated with our connection to nature and living things. Being outdoors in nature is associated with benefits including physical, cognitive, emotional, social, spiritual health. So all the things that we talk about kind of come back to what this means. So, for example, you walked up today. How many of you are new to this building? So when you walked up today, you saw our front yard. We take great pride in our front yard, and thank you for all those parents that helped us build our hedge, because that is the ultimate green space for our kids. We also have a lot of other things that we'll talk about that kids play with. And I don't know if you noticed when you came up, we had kids outside playing with sticks and rocks and building things in our front yard. We take it serious with everything that we do. But if we're talking about gifted children in particular, it's important for you to understand the definition we use as an organization for gifted. Now, many of you may or may not know that there are many different definitions of gifted. We choose to use the Columbus Group definition of gifted education. And the reason we do that is because it really talks about something we feel is one of the most compelling characteristics of a gifted child, and that's the asynchronous development. They all experience something like this at some point in their life. So giftedness is asynchronous development in which advanced cognitive ability and heightened intensity combine to create inner experiences and awareness that are qualitatively different from the norm. Do any of you experience that with people you know that are gifted?
Sure.
They're different from the norm. This asynchronicity increases the higher the capacity that we have. So the higher the intellectual ability, the more that asynchronous development happens, which makes kind of sense. What makes this more challenging is that sometimes as parents and teachers, we don't quite know who we're talking to in any given moment. Are we talking to the 30-year-old self, or are we talking to the 4-year-old who really is having a problem with the broccoli right now? It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. Now, while we're talking about the importance of nature, it's also kind of important just to quickly go over the basic characteristics of gifted. Most of you know these. I'm just kind of going through it just to get us on the same page of where we're starting from. These kids have excellent memories. They have a drive to learn. They're very intellectually active, and they need that stimulation. Again, whether it's through a textbook or learning how to build a hut outside. Interested in philosophical and social issues, politics, empathy. Those are really important things. Justice. They're intellectually curious, and they have these amazing, wonderful, vivid imaginations. As I said before, I think Harry Potter was the best things that ever happened to gifted children. Yes, some are a little afraid of that as they get older in the process, but the whole concept of making it okay to have this great imagination and magical thinking. Huge. These young people also have a great sense of humor, which is the delight of my days and nights. I adore them. And they're hysterical. It is just the best time. How many of you have a time where you try so hard not to laugh with your child when they say something, but just amazing. They have this advanced ability to understand abstract ideas and problem solving. So they really look at things in different ways, in ways that help us look at things in different ways, which is beautiful. They have unusual emotional depth and intensity, and they're extremely empathetic. One of the things we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout the evening is this empathy aspect of the child. And their heightened sense of justice. They're extremely sensitive to many things, but this sense of justice is really another thing we're going to talk a little bit tonight. So, the natural environment is diverse and complex. The gifted child is diverse and complex. It provides unique opportunities to learn and to connect. Many of our gifted and highly gifted children have trouble connecting with other young people that don't have the same intellectual capacity that they do. It's our job to help them figure out how to do that, but the best way to do that is to help them find those peers, learn those social cues so they can take that to other levels. So where are opportunities to do that, to learn together and connect? The question is not what you look at, but what you see. So Calvin turned something that he saw into a very creative, playful experience. Not everyone would see it that way. So what these gifted kids see is very different than what other people might see. Gifted children not only think differently than other children, they see things differently, they feel things differently. Their whole world is just a little bit different, whether it's the beauty of rainbows or the thunderstorms that come in. The intensity and the depth of that. That leads us to what we often call, or Michael Bukowski calls from Dabrowski, overexcitabilities. While this is a very simplistic view of what Dabrowski talks about in his theory of how people think and do things, personalities, it does give us a window into the intensities of a gifted child. Psychomotor, the physical activity of movement, rapid talk, pacing, use of hand gestures. I always say I don't do any of this. This is really hard for me to be confined because we're on screen here, so I can't move. I'm really frustrated by that. So I'm going to be doing a lot of this tonight. I apologize in advance. But the psychomotor of really being able to do those things. Some of our kids have to do that to think. So they'll be sitting in their chair needing to move around, but that's how they process information. So sharing that with a teacher is sometimes challenging because they don't understand that that's actually how they're gaining that knowledge. The sensual, these experiences that are kind of unusual to others, of being able to look at a tree in the way the shadows form, or looking at the stars and imagining what is beyond those stars, listening to some music in a different way, that feeling of needing to have things smooth and not rough, or rough because I like the texture. But all those sensual kinds of things that are important, and do really, especially for a younger child, separate them from the norm, because they just feel those things so deeply. As we said, the imaginational, very clear imagination. They daydream, they have magical thinking. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem of trying to figure out, is this a real story you're telling me? Did this really happen? Can we kind of separate the truth from a little bit of that? It's all good, great story, but let's try to figure out where the reality is in here, just so I can help you a little bit more. And the intellectual. This is obvious. We see this all the time about the need to analyze and ask questions. This intensity is real though, and it can be so devastating to a child, as you saw in the characteristics of a gifted child, if they are told they cannot go further, if they're told they have to stop. If I was told I had to do this all day long, it would be nearly kill me. It's so painful to have to be told to stop to do something that you need to do to survive. And the emotional. This is where it gets emotional, and this is where the nature comes in. So we're going to talk about empathy, emotion, and different aspects of how we can work with these young people to ensure they have those connections. We know the feeling of the intellect begins the process of personal growth, which is basically what we all want for our children, that personal and intellectual growth. They go together. You can't really have one without the other. That self-concept improves when all aspects of self are nurtured in a safe, authentic environment with like-minded peers. So I'd like for you to do an exercise for just one moment. Take a deep breath. Let it out. One more time, close your eyes this time. Now with your eyes closed, I want you to picture a place or a time where you felt completely, totally at peace and connected to something that was wonderful. Think of that space. How did it feel on your cheek? What kind of sounds do you hear? Are your hands tingling? Are you lying down? Sitting up? do you smell? And take another deep breath. Let it out. Open your eyes. How many of you had that space was an outdoor space? The majority of you, it doesn't happen all the time, but the majority of you, that's true. And it's important. When you were in college or high school, how often when a teacher took you outside to do a class outside, was that like the best day ever? There's something to that, not just because you're outside, but there's something important about that space. Well, now I know that research actually helps us understand this aspect of what it all is. Studies provides evidence that these experiences boost our academic learning, our personal development, and environmental stewardship. Well, we know, as you probably know, many of our kids do have that empathy and that compassion and passion for nature and for our earth. But being out and seeing that wilderness and experiencing that outdoors aspects of things really enhances that to another level of where they're going to take this from here. Not only in that sense of how am I going to save the environment and what can we do to make sure we're being responsible, but also how can I physically be outside because it brings me peace. And that's a lifelong lesson that they take with them. So this personal development has quality data showing shifts in problem solving, critical thinking, leadership, teamwork, and resiliency. So you can kind of see where these two things are coming together a little bit of the importance of this, but how are we managing it all and how do we tie it together? How are we fostering our children in this outdoor environment? A lot of the new research, not even new, but research demonstrates that nature reduces stress. Well, I know that's true for me. I don't know about you, but whether it's a beach or a mountain, or no, people often ask, are you a beach person, a desert person, mountain person? Whatever you are, whatever that is for you, that smell of the ocean or fresh cut grass or whatever it is, there's an immediate reduction of stress. This high school study I found completely fascinating. And I had to go back to my experience in high school too to see if I could really relate to this. But it demonstrated that if you had a window that looked over green vegetation, your stress rate was reduced. Therefore, you were able to concentrate better and focus better, and the learning was better. Test taking was better. It's fascinating that that happens. Well, we see that now in architecture when they're building buildings with windows and green space because we know that makes a difference in an employee. Same thing happens to a student. Then, students learning in a forest setting 1 day a week showed healthier daytime rhythms in their cortisol than the control group. So initially, many people thought this is because, well, gosh, you're taking them outside, there's that physical activity and that's getting the brain going, and that's why. No, it's not the physical activity. It's the experience. It's all aspects of sense of all who you are, from touch, feel, smell, that makes a difference in that. And this continued throughout the day. So it lingered. So even being outside for a little bit of time makes a difference. This is something we often talk about with gifted education. If a child has the opportunity to have their intellect stretched and their mind really, really challenged in good ways, that kind of high that they get, it lingers for a while.
I work with someone who does vision therapy, and he says the number one thing that's best for kids with vision issues is to get outside and walk, because you're stimulating your eyes, and your eyes can't actually focus on just one thing like they can inside. So there's that diversity effect that is stimulating to the eyes and then the whole body. So just this, and kids' vision actually gets better if they walk to school for half an hour.
It makes so much sense. And a lot of this research is also demonstrating that because so many of our young people, well, all of us, are inside doing adult-driven activities using a screen or technology, so they're not using the those senses that maybe we did or our parents didn't, walking to school every day or playing outside, and having those different ways to look at things in shadows and light. And
Complexity, yeah.
that's a great point. So this theory I love. I'd never heard of it before. So I thought that this guy made it up, but I love the term, so it's fine. We're just going to use it. Theory of loose parts, which kind of goes back to in shop when we were younger, or things when kids built things. But taking kids outside to make things in nature, the creativity that comes from that. There's a cognitive benefit to that. There's a benefit of trying to figure out how things work together. Are you going to pull up a plant to create something, or are you just going to take a leaf that's already on the ground? What kinds of things go into building something? And the self-directed play. This is a youngster who was at camp last year with us. We have a fellow at camp, Dan Tishner. He's one of our fellows, and he loves to take the kids outside. That's his space where he really shines with them. And they build nature sculptures every year. And you would be surprised at what happens to many of these young people. Many of these kids come and have intensities and overexcitabilities and do like to move around a lot, have trouble sitting still, but going outside and building a structure that you can go and sit by for the week, it's amazing. So this is one of the sculptures that was made last year, and against the tree you can see other tall sticks or twigs or logs, depending on the size. And every year the kids build these things, go back to the spot where they were, and they kind of dig around to see what they can find and to recreate something that's new, but still has that connection to something else. So how does this whole thing affect our physical health? Well, it seems pretty obvious when we're outside. This asynchronous development, the intellect can outpace the physical maturity as well as emotional. We talked about that. But in an asynchronous environment of being outside, there's that huge physical component of being able to move better, to deal with the challenging road of a trail, of not being smooth, having to pay attention and focus on something else. The energy that you get from wanting to do something that's amazing, of jumping over a river, trying to catch the rocks, running up and down the mountains. Those are natural things that happen. It clearly improves appetite and sleep, and being outside, we've got that vitamin D. Now, I will guarantee that using us again as an example, every year we go and we have kids that do other programs with us. So we kind of estimate the amount of food we'll need for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There is not a day that we don't have to order more food, because these kids are so used to a certain diet and they are very picky about what they eat and how they eat, but they just are so hungry and have that natural desire to be outside and eat, enjoy, and be in the moment. It's true. And they all sleep very well. Not long, but long. And this is where the balance comes into the physical health, because a lot of our kids do need help in understanding that physical aspect of what kind of sport, what kind of activity is going to challenge you. Many gifted kids don't like to be on teams. Some do, some don't, but many like to just do things that are personally challenging to them. Running, taekwondo, biking, tennis, golf. Those are some of those activities that are kind of personally challenging. So being outside where you can hike a trail with your buddies or just by yourself, it's pretty great. But you also have the opportunity in certain places to be able to do actual balance. Walking across that log, balancing on that stone so you don't fall into the creek. And if you fall in the creek, you fall in the creek. The ropes courses that are physically challenging, or the swings, or different kinds of things that are provided in those environments. Play becomes more physically active and social when the opportunity for discussion, exploration, and discovery those loose parts come together. So then sometimes these kids come together to build something because they find it interesting or compelling. This is day 2, and these young people did not know each other, and 2 of them are 10, and 1 is 11, so very kind of nervous experience being there, but seem to be smiling. And this is what they created. Working together as a team, didn't know each other, gifted kids, communicating, talking, and building something that was sustainable. So how does that fit into the cognitive aspect of who we are? That exploration for knowledge. So when you're outside, so many things to discover. Looking at bugs. What kind of soil samples can you get? What does it mean when you have a water drop on a leaf that stays in that round circle? It's just fascinating. There's so many questions to think about when you're out there doing those things. Learning about plants, not only questioning, but then discovering the geology of where we are. And learning physical new skill sets. That's a cognitive skill as well. Learning how to do something. How do you create a zip line and then follow through with that? How did they make the zip line? All different cognitive kinds of questions to ask. This is the perfect optimal match. And when you heard me talk about other things, or as an organization, when we're in an educational environment, we really look for that optimal match in learning. So you want something that's not too easy, because then you're kind of slacking off. But if it's too hard, it snaps. So you want that optimal learning environment that's got that torque, that kind of tension. This is the perfect environment for that, because they naturally are going to create that space where they're going to work as hard as they can to a certain goal, and then they're going to stop where they're comfortable stopping. Differentiation. Not every child is going to be able to build the same thing, but in that environment, it's perfectly okay, because whatever you build is amazing. And everyone's supporting each other because you did something that was unique and beautiful. If you fall in the lake because you didn't make it across, it's kind of funny, but it's not a big deal because somebody else is going to do it in a minute. So it's very equalizing, yet differentiation at the same time. So wonderful way to be able to experience those different levels of learning for a child. In this cognitive space too, they're not only learning that, but this takes over to the social skills that we'll talk about in a minute, because they're also learning how to be supportive of one another. How do you talk to somebody and communicate with them in a way that's clear and not offensive? How can you embrace something that's new in a positive way? And when you're with people in this kind of environment, they come from different places. So what are you learning about them? Asking those appropriate questions. The next day comes. Do you want to go outside and see if you can climb that rock wall a little bit taller? It's your own self-evaluation. What are you doing to improve yourself, or what you're able to do or see or think about? And we know that this does affect one's ability for attention. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I have done with many of my clients over the years is we do a temperature read in the morning before they leave for school. If it's one of those days, it's going to be one of those days. Then you run outside to your favorite tree, you touch the tree, you talk to the tree, you sit by the tree, you hug the tree, you come back in, you breathe a little bit, and then you go on with your day. So trying to figure out how those that restorative things happen in your world. I had great plans. It didn't quite work out because my weekend got blown up with different things. I had great plans of going to buy a piece of sod of grass to bring today, so you all can be touching the grass while you were here, because I think it would be very restorative and happy and healthy. So think about that. Just imagine that you have that. we know, and more schools are doing this, that have the ability to do so, that schools that utilize outdoor and that kind of combination of outdoor indoor space really does help students gain knowledge, not only in mathematics, but in language arts and humanities. So this again is our outdoor space here, but we see that in our own small cosmos here at the IEA, but in different areas, you probably see that too in schools. So when we're in this opportunity, another way of learning, sometimes our gifted young people are a little bit risk adverse. They sometimes don't want to do something that they're afraid they won't do well. So what are the experiences we could do that are teaching that without teaching that? And again, going back to being out in nature and what kinds of things can we do? So encouraging someone to step out of their comfort zone with realistic expectations, we're not going to push anybody off a ledge or anything, but provides a different kind of aha experience of, look what I did. Yesterday, I didn't think I could climb that wall. I did it today. That memory in the brain transfers over. And those kinds of conversations that you have of what's the worst thing that could happen? You try, you don't do it. All right, it's fine. We'll try again tomorrow. Is a way of coping in the world. So using an outdoor experience to figure out how to cope in the world. Hopscotch outside, being able to do those things. Sometimes that's really hard, but then one day you get it. And that's really, really, really cool. Little things like that make a difference. So what kind of social skills? You can probably imagine already. Anybody have an idea?
Taking turns.
Okay, that's a good one. When you're outside, you provide space to be alone and connect to living things by yourself. That's a good thing. Self-regulating again. I need to take a time out and go outside and sit for a minute. But advanced interaction with other peers, like the peer-to-peer mentorship things are really important. So this is when we talk about challenging each other. We talk about things to working together, helping one another to figure out how to take turns. What can I do for you today that you're going to do for me later? Living in a space together in a community of what does that look like? I need to reach my hand out to help you to cross that river. Whether I like you or don't like you or know you or don't know you, it doesn't really matter. My job is to help you across that because that's the right thing to do. So learning those social skills and not just with peer-to-peer, but modeling. So in a space like this, the facilitators are modeling this behavior. We're all doing this together. We're not going to ask you to climb that rock wall unless one of us is doing that too, that you've seen somebody else do it. We're all modeling this behavior of learning together in this space. How does that provide that encouragement, that confidence? One of the things that are tenets at IEA are creativity, perseverance, and these two things we think are really powerful. And in these two aspects of being outside, really important. Trying and trying, even if you don't quite get there, it's okay. But you really did make an effort to do so. And making an effort is really important. Give it a go. Keep trying. Social skills in this environment. I'm not going to say every kid gets along with everybody because that's just not true. There are conflicts. But when there's a conflict, what happens? It's an opportunity to problem solve, figure it out, some kind of resolution. How do we make that work? In a safe environment where these kids feel like they can actually talk about how they feel about something, that this just wasn't right, or I feel this way, then they really can have that conflict resolution. They really can figure out what are those social skills that are important. To be fully present without a digital device. It is remarkable to see, and the studies, as you know, demonstrate this, that we have more and more young people that are in a space of depression and anxiety. And a lot of that is due to the constant connection to some kind of device. And even when there's a bing or a click or something to indicate that you may have gotten a message, that anxiety level rises. It's almost a high in the sense of I see what that is, and that nervousness occurs, but you're losing focus. That's not going to change anytime soon in our culture, but we got to figure out how to manage that. So practicing times without those devices, I can't tell you the number of times we have parents that when we go to UNASA and we say, no, yeah, you get no physical, sorry. And the parents will say, but my child can't survive without that. We're going to give it a go. We're just going to trust the universe that your child will survive. And if not, we'll call you. So really taking the time to trust that experience. And there are a couple of kids that do miss them music-wise, things like that. So we find other ways to solve that issue, but taking away that distraction so you can be present. And that's not just in nature, but that's in life. But being present outside really does enhance the benefits you're getting from that fresh air, or from listening to the tree, or looking at around, all the different things around you. This working together to communicate clearly, learning to ask for help. That's a really big one for a lot of our little guys, because they're so used to either figuring things out on their own, or they are embarrassed that they can't figure it out, or they don't want to talk about how they feel. It's all confusing. But to ask for help, that's huge. So if you can start by asking for help for, I need help dishing up my dinner tonight. I need help. I want to climb that mountain tomorrow. Will you walk with me up that hill? Asking those appropriate things transfers over, and we try to help facilitate that. And as parents, you trying to facilitate those kinds of questions too is really valuable. Listening, patience, and how to politely disagree, which again is really hard for a lot of our little guys, because they're always right. So while building your nature sculptures or a walk, trying to strategize how to do different things, we're going to talk a little bit about building a labyrinth. It's one of the things that we do at camp that's really very, very powerful. Or encouraging a friend. These are the social skills that we don't always get the opportunity to really play out at school. In recess, we don't always have those opportunities. It's not long enough to be able to have that kind of experience of helping another child do something that's like this. And understanding what it means to really appreciate something around you and be in that space, whether you're silent and not talking, or you're communicating just with body language, or you're just feeling the presence of what's around you. And the resilience. By doing things that you're not comfortable with doing, as we said before, really does build up that sense of resilience of, I may fail, but I'm okay. I can try it again later, and transferring those to other skill sets. Again, teamwork building. They were building a little dam to help some little frogs that were having trouble. How many of you walked the labyrinth? We have, again, one of our senior fellows really believes in the power of labyrinths for a variety of reasons. And he is a special ed teacher. I used them when I was teaching special ed years and years and years ago. But the power of a labyrinth with a gifted child is very similar. So a labyrinth is a walking path that quiets the mind, opens the heart, and centers the body. This labyrinth is in Colorado. This particular labyrinth has been built in 4 different places on this campsite because of weather or terrain or something happens. So the kids come back and it's not there. They're learning things. Okay, we got to rebuild. We can do it. We can do it. We did it the first time. They carry these rocks up the hill. They create the labyrinth. So there's a lot of cognitive ability going on here. There's the emotional ability going on here. There's the connection to nature. And what does that mean? This particular labyrinth now is permanent. It's actually on their map now. What this does is provide an opportunity for walking meditation. Well, so we all know that part of what we do a lot of in our organization, guided imagery, visualization, how to calm the mind and the body, how to do those things. For many kids, sitting is very challenging to be able to meditate in that sense of the self. So doing walking meditations is huge. It's still calming the mind. It's clearing that experience. It's just doing it in a different way. And the thing about a labyrinth is there's no wrong way to do it. It's not like a maze where you're stuck. It's open. Find your tried, you walk through, you get to the end. You either sit, breathe, come back out again. It goes back to just taking a walk. So often the best thing we can do for kids in school when they're this way is say, I think you need to take a note to the principal for me. Could be a fake note, could be anything. I think you need to go, don't you need some water? I think you need some water. Getting up, moving in a physical way is really important. Now, if you have the opportunity to enhance that with something outside, very important. So spirit. When we talk about spirit, we're not talking about things about religious. We're talking about what the spirit is within. And what does that mean? And the spirit of a gifted child is really remarkable. And I think one of the most important aspects of what we do with these young people, they are so amazing, so powerful, and so much to offer, but we want to keep that spirit going and that spirit alive. Michael Bukowski, who spoke last week or last session, is one of our senior fellows and our first fellow. And he is an amazing gentleman and has done a tremendous amount of research in the field of gifted education, but also in Nebraska. And he has lots to offer in those ways. But he talks about the spirit of a child in this way, that the exploration of nature and other living things enhances the spirit, providing a greater connection, consciousness, and respect for the inner self and the world around them. He shared that children with spiritual gifts have the ability to induce heightened consciousness through deliberate techniques like meditation, deep thought, extensive imagination, and wisdom beyond their years, which we know they have. When we listen and we hear it, it's there. They connect to infinite energy. The imagination of a gifted child, the ability to see things that aren't there but are true to them, connect to a world that doesn't even exist but does exist. And that's where our future is allowing them to have that spirit, that imagination, that ability to see things that we don't. Those are our gifted little guys. So as Michael talked about, the emotional sense is really important, and it provides that sense of what is the thing to study. Without that kind of thing, for our kids, it's just sterile. They need that emotional intensity. They need to be able to think that they can free a butterfly. They need to be able to look at a rainbow and say, wow, they understand what a rainbow is, but hey, it's still cool. We know emotion can fuel passion for learning, but with these kids, it can also create anxiety because they're so emotional about something. But again, going back to outside, we can break that anxiety down. And we know from the research that just being in that kind of space and teaching them to calm down and use that opportunity is a life-changing way to enhance their emotional well-being. And it increases that empathy, not only for who they are and their friend, but for others around them. They look at after each other. They're mindful of the plants around them. They're very aware of things in a positive way. We had one little guy, he wasn't little, he was much taller than I was at the time, who came to camp petrified of bugs. I mean, petrified of bugs. He wouldn't sit still. He cried, he yelled. It was challenging. Like, oh, how are we gonna do this? By the end of camp, he was saying to people, be careful, don't step on it. I mean, he was so aware. He was already aware of the bugs, but he was aware of the bugs in a different way of thinking of things. He had an empathy that he never had before. His parents said when he went home that he actually like hugged his younger brother and stuff and things he'd never done before. I'm like, oh, well, it's the bugs. This is what, and I have some books I want to show you too. Helen Reese calls shared mind intelligence. That we bring these kids together. There is some magical, intense connection of consciousness that happens that does connect them to a greater universe and to each other. And that's important because we do have, when we bring people together that have that openness to communicate, amazing things happen. We know that the body can't be in a state of relaxation and stress at the same time. So let's be relaxed. Let's help our kids learn to relax and appreciate what's around them. Can you read that?
Mm-hmm.
Makes you want to go to Alaska, right? So developing resiliency, just quickly, the kinds of things we talked about, making sure they're emotionally aware, that they develop that perseverance, that there's a sense of optimism, and there's hope out there, and there's lightness in a world that's sometimes not so light for them. How to learn to be a community member and learn from their mistakes. All these things that we just talked about happen outside. Appreciate the humor in things that are going on around them. Try to help them manage their intensities. We don't want to change who they are. We just want to help them manage it. Bring it in a little bit so they have a more successful opportunity for lifelong learning, and to understand that they need to accept change because things don't always go the way we think they're going to go. But in the end, there's sunsets that are beautiful and we can share them together. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
We come to a comfort zone and allowing them, it seemed like, if I'm paraphrasing you, allowing them each day to be challenged a little bit outdoors and attempting something to help them just overall in their comfort zone of that resistance. Is that what you would say? Is there other things that you recommend?
So one of the things that we start out with, and not only there, but other places we do, is we start out with the very first day of a child drawing a circle. And I do this with some of my clients too. This is a circle, like a bullseye. Write down what you're comfortable with there, or draw a picture depending on the age. This is your total comfort zone. Now we're gonna go just a little bit outside to this line. What's the next thing on that comfort zone? And then another circle, here, here, here. When you're here this week, or today at home this week, what do you want to do to get outside that comfort zone to here? So working through the baby steps it takes to get to do things that you haven't quite mastered or you want to try. Whether it's, I really want to be able to play on the playground with some friends, So baby step is maybe spend 5 minutes doing something or talk to a teacher first, or what does that look like or how does that feel? So whatever it happens to be, but start with the comfort zone and then look back at, wow, look what you did by stepping out of that comfort zone. Often asking where is their favorite place to be? For many kids, it can be their bed. It could be under the dining room table. It really depends, but just find another safe place for you to be that could be outside, that could be comfortable to you.
What about for kids who are risk takers outdoor? Like I just was watching a picture of Alex 3 years ago with a friend, like 10 feet, 10 or 15 feet high above on the tree, and I was just trying to calm myself,
Breathe
not
through
to
it.
interrupt. So it's like, and like if he goes to there, those climbing thing, he will go to the top right away. And but before he did fell from a spider wall, like the first day in a ninja camp, and broke a toe, something like that. It's like for risk takers, how would you help them to manage?
Well, it sounds like he kind of is managing it, honestly. It's frightening to you, but it's also asking the questions of, let's be mindful, what are we doing? So stopping before any activity, let's be mindful, what are the risks? What's the reward in what we're trying to accomplish? But it's that stopping moment in any activity is always a good thing, especially with compulsiveness of stopping. Let's think for a second. Okay, now let's try to make sure we're moving ahead in appropriate ways.
Or just a broken toe, how to
Well,
regulate
it's
the
kind of like
activities.
you learn. I mean, that's kind of, I hate to say it that way, but that's sometimes the way you learn a little
But do
bit.
you think mindfulness or something like that might be an opportunity to like create that pause for a person to,
Absolutely.
like, so they can then reflect.
Do any of you have things you want to share with each other that you've had experience with in this regard?
I want to pick up what she just mentioned. My child, because he's gifted and he skipped a grade, that's a problem because when he skipped a grade, the school have a mixed age the playground. So my son always get injured. So when you earlier mentioned that this way he will learn. So as a parent, I also worry about, well, last week he had 4 stitches under
So
here.
sorry.
And this week he has all the bruises cut on the hand. So I don't know, when you say learn, is my child learn how to adapt this situation, or as parents, I also need, should I pull him out? So I don't know how to adjust the balance with the children.
I haven't a thought for that, but does anyone else have an experience like that you want to share?
I have a word that I use with my son. I'll just say to you, how do you feel safe? Where do you think you can put your hand? So I just try to get him to think about where he's putting his body. And I have the opposite problem. My son is like almost 5 feet tall and he's 7.
Oh my God.
So people think he's much older, give him different expectations. Yeah.
My son is tall too, but not as tall.
Well, it's also managing expectations, and it goes back to one of those things too we said of asking for help. That sometimes in that asynchronous development, there's the perception that I'm at this level and I should be able to do these things that are a little more physically challenging that maybe they're not quite ready for. So asking for help if I would like to learn to do this, or is there a place I feel safe in this zone right here? I don't feel safe going this much farther out of it. Where's that comfort zone? Talking to, which again is really hard for some of these guys, talking to the adults on the playground. I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like there's a lot going on there. But find that safe zone. And kids do learn from bumps and bruises, as long as they're just bumps and bruises. Yes.
I also, when my son started and having recess, he got very obsessed with the monkey bars. And so every day he'd come home, and there was one time where each finger had not a callus but a blister, just that was oozing with blood, and he couldn't stop himself, you know. And we got him into sports, soccer, baseball, basketball, and so now he chooses to do those instead of the monkey bars. And because I think it's because he saw other kids, how they're playing on the team. There was some sort of self-regulation in what he does at recess now. And he doesn't choose the monkey bars, and he doesn't get hurt as often. So I actually attribute it to the group sports that worked for him. But
That's
it was
great.
quite intense. Why don't I had so many discussions. Why do you want to do this if it's hurting yourself? It's fun, it's a hard one, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, with our son, it's the sports that's injuring him.
Okay.
He
Okay.
has a competitive spirit. He wants to make sure he wins the game at any cost, if it costs his own flesh.
We got a concussion. On the soccer.
It's the sports thing is more challenging now, I think, because of the competitiveness that everyone really feels that they have to win versus what's the worst thing that happens. So those lessons of, so you didn't win, but did you enjoy yourself today? Was there something you learned today? Did you meet somebody new, or those kinds of things? And it's a challenging experience, because if you're the only parent saying that and other parents aren't saying those things, that's hard.
I have a 13-year-old, this is just a new question, sorry, but she's dealing with anxiety about leaving. So when we've tried outdoor ed before with school, she would find a phone somewhere and call, crying for me to pick her up. So I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that. I definitely, a lot of the things described her as far as like averse to taking risks and just needing her safety, but just this new thing, maybe she'll fail if she doesn't know what's planned for the day. So I think it's just a lot of fear in the unknown. But how do you deal with that? If it sounds like an amazing thing once you're there and kind of learn how to adapt, but the actual getting there and convincing her to buy into this benefit is like, I think for her it would be so terrifying. Have you run into that or any?
So definitely we have with our camp, but with whatever experience some of these kids have, they have those kinds of anxieties if it's something different or new or they've never experienced it. And they don't know how they're supposed to feel. And it's that discomfort of not knowing how to feel in a certain way, because they're so used to everything being in one particular way. So starting out with small discomforts or outside the comfort zone in small ways that will help build up to that. Spending the night with an aunt or an uncle, or even an afternoon with somebody. It depends on how tough it is. And just, while it's hard to say because you can't always say this, but I will be here when you get back. I will be here when you get back. Your bed will be here when you get back, but you're going to go try this and you're going to try it. And if nothing else, you're going to try it for me. And then we'll try something for you next time. But just trying to start that responsibility a little bit. We rarely, in our experience, after a day or two, even the most homesick kids are fine. But it really is hard sometimes for those kids the first night or two, and it's we don't let the kids call home that first night. And I would encourage that too if they're doing the aunt or uncle or whatever, because as soon as that mom's on the phone, it's often me when I call my moms after a bad day. There's something about calling home that you think you go back to your, it's your safety net, so you can fall apart. But encourage that sense of self and that confidence. I can do something a little bit more challenging. I don't know, trying to find something like that.
I have a question. So why is there a local version of UNASA? Or is there a certain reason for UNASA to be far away?
We don't have a local camp. The only reason why it's in Colorado and Michigan, and just because those are YMC camps that we can rent. It's very pragmatic. But we try very hard in some of our classes here and whatnot to do that breathing and to try to help kids understand the importance of being outside and being aware of one another, and those kinds of skill sets are really important.
What age does the camp start at?
10. Again, while these camps are these are things you can practice anywhere too. So I would be encourage you to be mindful of those things as well. And finding other groups of kids that, a lot of our kids don't like to get dirty. I don't know, but understanding it's okay to be in the mud is great, and to hike is great, and those kinds of things, just experiencing the different texture of things. Any other questions?
Are there summer classes that you're offering this summer that have a bend toward nature that you might recommend?
Nothing specific, but they do have a lot of time outside that is kind of constructive, that we do different things around.
It's incorporated into each class.
Well, around the what we call white space between the space. But our director of or coordinator of UNAS is trying very hard to incorporate things into other things that we do, and try to do weekends and days and stuff in our local areas as well.
When I think back on my outdoor experiences, they were some of the most transformational in my life. But what I struggle with now, and the kids that I work with in the day-to-day, is, you touched on this earlier, is getting them off the technology. And we have a generation of parents that are parenting this problem for the first time, and everyone's all over the map as to how to handle it. I don't know if you have any tidbits of advice for that now, or maybe we could do a talk sometime on that issue.
That's a great idea.
Everybody's struggling with that.
It's
Because this is great, there's so much benefit, but the technology they're so wired for it right now. They're not wired for that.
well, for us, we just take it away, which isn't helpful for a daily experience.
No.
Other than there are moments or afternoons or things that you start doing that. But it's interesting, last year at our Carolyn D. Bradley Scholar Seminar program, we had a lot of the scholars, which are high school students, talk about how they were very proud of the fact that they would go 2 weeks without technology and how hard it was. But that was something we're so proud of.
Yeah.
And it's kind of becoming I can do this kind of thing where they're doing it together and collectively. But that would be a great talk to have, I think, in how we can work through that in more systematic ways, because everybody's different, but there's got to be other ideas.
Just to jump in here, I worked at a high school prior to coming here, and I've seen coaches handle it with their athlete students in different ways. And one technique I saw, one coach would say, you've got this amount of time, 30 seconds as a break. You can do whatever you want, whether that's getting water, going through the restroom, looking at your phone, that's your choice. That's your option. So they'd have to choose out of that option. A lot did choose the phone at first, and then over time would move towards water or snack or other options. But that was a very specific, limited time. And another a technique that I saw was scheduling time. So you can schedule time to look at your phone, and you can look at it in that schedule. Otherwise, your time is scheduled for something else. And so having the schedule gave them the ability to sort of moderate themselves and say, okay, I can look at that at the end of the hour for 5 minutes. And that's how they would monitor the time. Some kids it worked, some it didn't work at all, but different techniques. Yeah. And I really like the idea of having some dialogue around how to implement different techniques.
Well, it's the modeling too. I mean, we can't just, it's got to be an overall.
Yeah, it's part of the family culture now.
Exactly.
So, yeah, everyone's, I don't really believe in the word addicted to it, but there's definitely a real strong draw.
Well, some of these kids talked about how they felt it was like an addiction, and that the withdrawals that they felt and how hard it was the first couple of days, and then after by day 5, they're like, wow, I feel so free. I mean, I'm actually looking up at I'm looking at the trees. I can see things. I didn't know that we're here. I didn't notice that building that I went to every day before. Just the way they talked about it felt like it was an addiction for them.
Oh,
it's fascinating.
There is brain chemistry that every time you get a teen, the dopamine goes up in the brain, and you get that positive feedback reaction. Oh, somebody texted me.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Thank you all for being. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Fill some space, but no, it has not to do with technology at all. But my son, who's 9, went to sleepaway camp for the first time this summer, and it was very interesting because it wasn't in like a gift. It was a mix, all kinds of kids. And the social skills, we saw a big jump in the social skills in that kind of what you talked about, like in nature, like he came back and we had to make a shelter for one kid in our cabin, so we chose the smallest kid, and this problem solving, but also working with a group, which is something that can be a challenge at school, was not so much of a challenge there, so that was great. And he came home saying that he had been homesick and cried a lot about being homesick, but my husband, he just went to Catalina with his school for 3 days and 2 nights, and he's young for his grade, and he had no fear, and he kind of went. It was interesting to see, like, as that experience metabolized for him, that the homesickness part kind of faded out of his memory, and what was left was like kind of this confidence and this, you know, I know what I'm doing and I can go. And so he's coming back next summer for 2 weeks, and he's got,
He didn't remember the homesickness.
no, like that fades. And I was a camp counselor, so I was very much like, you just go. I told him that homesickness is like the chicken pox, like you can only get it once, because then you've kind of been through it and you're like, oh, I want the other side, and it really has faded.
That's so great, I like that.
I hope it's true, because I told him a lot of times, but no, but it's been anyways, it was a very positive experience. I came home saying like I had a fun time, but I don't know if I want to go back. I was homesick, and that part all kind of faded, and we've seen so many, not just like in that immediate, but kind of even as time goes, we kind of experience metabolism. We definitely are seeing a lot of benefit to confidence and social skills, and just kind of across the board. So it's great.
That's a great one. Thank you.
Betsy, thank you so much for coming in and giving your presentation for us. I want to share with you guys our upcoming next GSG, which is going to be on March 26th. This one's a bit different. It's going to be webinar only. So you can still go online and register for it, but it's only going to be online. And we have the